So we gonna talk about the Lord of the Rings. There ain't no script behind this. Let's just talk. So I just saw the Rings of Power, the very first episode, and I have mixed feelings on this. But before we get to all of that now, let's just discuss what just transpired. We met a couple of characters. The main character, as far as I'm concerned, is a lady by the name of Galadriel. Now, she is on a journey, and this journey encompasses a revenge journey, and she's looking for revenge for her brother who died at the hands of a couple of orcs during a battle that they were having with Sauron. Now, from what I understand, Sauron was not involved in this battle. It was only the two armies facing off against one another, and they lost. So now she's on a hunt to face Sauron and take over from where he left off. Couple of things on that now. Now, from what I understand, Sauron is not to be messed with. He's not really the individual you want to face in a one-on-one. If we have learned anything, and if we have seen anything, Sauron has very much the ability to take on an army by himself. If I remember in the Fellowship of the Ring, the first clip that I saw of Sauron, he was throwing 10 guys at a time and 20 guys at a time to the left and to the right, and with just a single swing. So he's not really someone to be trifled with. Now she's going on this journey, traveling through deep lands and fields and minefields and in snow, and as we saw in that one clip, right? She's climbing and scaling the rocks. Now, a couple of things. There were some things that I like, and let me touch on those first. This visually is a masterpiece. In terms of color grading and color spectrum, this is a masterpiece. In terms of the setting, this is beautiful. Weaponry, the armory, you get a full appreciation of what a fantasy show could look like when they have a budget as high as this one does. They did not, as John Hammond would say, they didn't spare any expense. They really didn't. Now, the tone of all of this, it's very bright, it's very colorful, it's very loud, it's very in your face, it's very out there, and that is something that I feel that they took full advantage of their budget when it came down to making sure that the setting was as beautiful and as memorable as possible, to make sure that you got the full grasp of this world. And from what we've seen so far, they're taking full advantage of the color spectrum and the color grading. Right now, that first battle with Sauron, I enjoyed that. I like the way the armies clash together, and how now this new race is now exposed to death, whereas death is something that they never knew before. Right, they're exposed to evil, so that's something that I'm glad they took full advantage of as well. The music, I love the music in this. I'm really enjoying myself listening to some of the music. Although with all of that said, the weaponry, the music, the colorful world, that very first battle that we see, the effects, everything from the tone, the tone change, it does leave a lot to be questioned. And namely, there are some things in this show that that really didn't hit home with me, right? So Galadriel's attack, or Galadriel's plan to ambush Sauron. Now, an entire army couldn't stop Sauron's army, and I already said that Sauron was not involved in this battle from what I saw. So if Sauron is not involved in this battle, and his army, which was numbered in maybe the thousands, lost to the orcs, what chance do they think they have? What chance do Galadriel and her 12 individuals really think they have going up against Sauron himself. That just puts people's lives at risk, and I don't understand why such a crafty, skilled swordsman, because she definitely is a skilled swordsman. There was that scene where she took down a troll on her, basically on her own. The other soldiers were struggling against the troll, and she swooped in and came to the rescue. So she kills that troll effortlessly, thus proving that she is very skilled with the sword. I got that. I completely understand that. I got no issue with it. But this plan just seems like it should have been thought through a little bit more. Now, I don't think I'm the only one when I say this. After this first episode, I was left with a lot of mixed feelings, and it left me with more negative feelings about this first episode than it did positive. And it's not that I'm trying to compare this to the Fellowship of the Ring, but I cannot help it. It just seemed like if they were on a mission to show and display how much of the ultimate fantasy this really is, and I feel like steps were missed. It just feels like something is off with this show. Like when it came down to the Fellowship, there were so many memorable scenes within the first half an hour. Yeah, I'd beg to say that within the first hour, it really set the tone for the change in motion. You get an idea of how dangerous the foe is, and how dangerous the ring is, and how much of a burden it is, and how it tempts people to become unlike themselves with Isildur, right? And after that victory, and he has the chance to destroy the ring, but chooses not to, but chooses to keep it for himself. And you see that, later on he's killed and the ring falls into someone else's hand. We then cut to a scene about the Shire. Right? It changes tone, but once we cut to the Shire, and now there's a mission that has to be had, you get a completely different tone change.
Get off the road! Quick!
When they go away from the Shire, it's a whole other change that I just feel flows so well. And this is one of the things that I was feeling like they were missing in this, right? Even when they introduced new characters, I can compare that to how they introduced Aragorn. Right? When they introduce characters here, they kind of just, walk in, and it almost feels like you're supposed to assume who these guys are without any real introduction. Whereas with Aragorn, the scene was dark, it was gritty, it was rough, it gave you an idea that this town and this world has just been brutalized by time, right? Whereas this now, every scene that I saw almost felt like it was the Shire. Even this revenge mission that she's on, when you cut to other scenes, it still feels like it's the Shire. Everything still feels very bright, very lively, very beautiful. And that is all good. However, though, if the whole premise of the first episode is trying to convince me that this revenge mission that she's on, Galadriel, she's on this mission to avenge her brother, I never really got the tone that I should care. And the reason why I never really got the feeling that I should care is because there was no established relationship that was developed properly and long enough. I think this should have They should have taken time to develop their relationship, and then when he goes off to war, it then justifies her going out for revenge, whereas we only saw about 5 minutes worth of relationship building between the two of them, and I'm trying to be generous in saying 5 minutes. If anything, we probably only saw 3 minutes, and it was when he gave her a little talk about the rock and the boat and all of this and all of that, right? And then he goes off to war, he dies, and now she's on a vengeance mission. I never really felt like this was supposed to like I was supposed to feel any kind of sense of loss for her, because to me there was nothing there. And if there's nothing there, then why do I care? And that's the problem I had with that. I was wondering, well, why shouldn't she just turn back and just go come up with a better strategy? And the reason why I couldn't understand her need for revenge is because I didn't care, because I don't understand the relationship between the two of them. So with all that said, now this show needed some ruggedness. There's a scene in the Fellowship of the Ring, and it's almost perfect. Beyond the scene with the Nazgul, when they're first introduced to the Nazgul, Frodo travels to a town, and there's no music. It's just rain, and it's dark, and it's muddy, and it's gritty, and they're running into wagons, and they're running past people, and they're just trying to make their way into a pub so that they can get something to eat and drink and just forget about what's going on for the time being, and just get into a place of refuge. But you get a sense that they're desperate for help at this point. They don't know what they're doing, they don't know where they're going, and they're in trouble, and they don't know who to trust. And this is when Aragorn pops into the mix. It's such a beautiful scene because it gives you a real sense of what the characters must be facing, dealing with this gritty world, knowing that all they ever knew was the Shire. This show, in episode 1, it might change in episode 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whichever, as long as we go. But in episode 1, I think it missed the mark. Unfortunately, at times, I actually started looking at my phone. I found myself a little kind of looking away from the screen because I didn't really know what I was paying attention to. And unfortunately, while this show was playing, I'm almost ashamed to say this, but I actually found myself getting a little bored. 30 minutes into the show, I actually found myself pausing and asking, how much longer is this going on, just because I was bored. There was a scene though that, if they had executed it, really would have caught me. 2 scenes that I like, actually. There's a moment when the girls are picking some blackberries, and they're eating, and it's just a casual scene. But then she mentions that they need to go because there's a wolf. I got the impression that this show was going to go for a bit of a darker turn, and I was actually hoping, maybe this is wrong for me to say this, but I was actually hoping that the wolf would come and potentially snatch away one of the kids. That would have given me a sense that, okay, this show is not playing around. But they she acknowledged that it was a wolf, and then they went back about their business. The second scene was at the ending. The ending left me a little bit curious, but I didn't really like how it ended. I like maybe 20 seconds before it ended, when you see the leaves and the meteor now coming down and touching down on the ground just like this, and everything starts to die. Everything starts to turn dark, and I actually found myself kind of perking up because I started getting a little excited, and I hadn't felt that for the last 55 minutes. But when that happened, I said, okay, we're taking a turn now. The show is now getting started. Unfortunately, I gotta wait for episode 2 because I think it was just getting started at that point. I don't know who that person is that fell out, but if everything is now going to take a little bit of a more rugged, darker turn, I think it would help. But in this case, for this first episode, if it's out of 10, based on everything that I just saw, I'll have to give this a 7. And the only reason I give this a 7 is because I really am convinced that they spared no expense when it came down to their budget to make sure that this show looked beautiful. And beautiful it did. Everything is well coordinated. The acting is fine. Everyone is doing their part. Everyone is doing their role. I get that. But I cannot help the fact that beyond everything, it was still a very boring episode. However, because the setting looks so beautiful, I can give it a solid 7. Worth watching, but I need to see episode 2. So I'll leave it there. That's all I got for now. And I'll see you guys for the next one. See ya.